Welcome to Collaboration Conversations. I'm your host, Regina Partain Bergman, CEO of Bridgeport Strategy. Once again, I am delighted to have an amazing co host and the astounding panelists that she has brought to the show today. This is going to be a truly remarkable show, folks. Can't wait to hear all of the valuable input that these ladies have into our topic today. So, my co host today is Robin Johnson. And Robin and I met recently through a women's organization called Lead Her Ship Global. Robin wears a few hats. And so I'm going to let Robin tell you about her hats. First of all, welcome to the show, Robin. Thank you for being co host. I appreciate it so very much.
I am thrilled to be here. I have so been looking forward to this conversation with these amazing women and a topic that is near and dear to my heart. And it's the human side of enterprise, the human side of business. I got my MBA from BYU literally 40 years ago. This is our 40th anniversary this year, with an emphasis in organizational behavior. Very long journey through life, stay-at-home mom for a long time, then got back into business. And then in 2019, actually graduating COVID class of 2020, got my Master's of Applied Positive Psychology from University of Pennsylvania. And a lot of the classes there address the issue of positive organizational scholarship and the human side of business. And so that's my a couple of my purposes in life is I help create workplaces where people want to stay instead of wanting to leave. And I've also created a series of well-being workshops for women where we are able to transform our inner critic into an inner cheerleader and discover our strengths and apply the science of behavior change. I'm
Awesome.
very quickly just going to go around, mention each person why I invited them. Tamara Miles, she was part of my class, COVID class of 2020 from Penn. She is becoming one of the world's experts in creating meaning and purpose in organizations. Erica Elam Fox, and she was also one of my classmates. And Erica specializes in improvisation. And I believe, so I specifically invited her because I believe that in changing organizations and in changing the world, we have to think outside the box. Eileen Rosenstein is totally delighted to, and we're just neighbors. We live like 5 minutes apart and we just met. So she is the assistant provost of USC. Today actually is her last day as assistant provost with that title. She's going to be doing other consulting and things like that. But obviously USC as an organization has had some challenges lately. And Eileen actually was at Penn for a long time before she went to USC. She's completely versed in positive organizational scholarship and comes at it from also an academic standpoint, which is really fascinating. And last but absolutely not least is Emily Taylor. And we know each other through a wonderful organization called Mormon Women for Ethical Government. And Emily did an amazing series of workshops on conflict resolution and peace building. And so again, if we're going to change organizations and change society, there's going to be conflict. How can we resolve that peacefully? And so that's just in a nutshell, all these amazing powerhouse panelists have today. So why don't we go in the order that you show up in my screen? Tamara, Erica, Eileen, and Emily, each tell a little bit about yourselves, and we're going to dive right into this amazing topic.
Great. Thank you so much, Robin and Regina, for having us here today. I am super excited for this conversation. Like Robin said, I focus my research and my work on the leadership behaviors that create meaning at work. I started that research 5 years ago with my friend and our friend from graduate school and research partner, Wes Adams. And we just we just turned in our manuscript for the book that's coming out next year with these practices. And I'm also now, I don't think you even know this, Robin, yet, but I am going to be a professor now at BC in the Masters of Science in Leadership, teaching some of these behaviors, creating me network, but positive psychology more broadly for, our future leaders is so important. So thank you for having me here.
Congrats, Tamara. That's
Thank
awesome.
you. Thank you.
Hi, friends. I'm Erica. Yeah, as Robin said, I come from a theater and an improvisation background. And so that's like my first love. But the work I do is around, I go into corporations, I work with grandmothers, I work with, right now, the work I'm really excited about is I started a program working with couples using positive psychology and improvisation to like improve communication, resilience as a couple, and teamwork, injecting play into that relationship. But I do the same thing for corporations. I go in and I teach team building and techniques to improve brainstorming and how to build, like how to have crucial conversations and all that fun stuff, but using play and improvisation as the sort of spoonful of sugar to teach these bigger concepts.
Also want to thank everyone for allowing me to be here. I am a psychologist by training, and where it's evolved is that I focus on teams and groups of people to empower them to really collaborate better, care about each other better, and be compassionate with each other. And USC, we were the first place to have a position of the Associate Vice Provost for Campus Wellbeing and Education. Now I'm consulting with all these other higher education institutions because people are realizing it's about relationships and how do we switch it to this kind of compassionate, caring, and collaborative work, and that anyone on a team could be a leader and influence where the organization goes. So that's my work, and I do that through consultation, assessment, workshops, trainings, etc. Thanks.
Fantastic. Well, so I actually also have a psychology background. I just finished my doctorate in developmental psychology, but I was studying when there's political and religious differences between young adults and their parents. That was just my research focus. But I just joined Utah Valley University. I'm the Ombuds and the Assistant Director of Conflict Resolution. So what that means and what's actually been really exciting is an Ombuds role within an organization. There's different kinds of Ombuds, but I'm a confidential conflict resource. So anyone, again, for a university, I've actually found it's kind of a growing movement to have on in higher education. An ombuds is a person, I don't keep permanent records. Anyone can come to me about anything, actually, that has to do with their either personal or, academic lives. And it could be staff, faculty, and we just try to figure out how to navigate within an organization what to do. So, and then I also teach adjunct mediation at Brigham Young University. So all things conflict resolution, but it's always interesting when you're seeing like a whole system of how conflict works. And so I like to get ahead of it also by doing trainings and workshops. So you get the funnel of all the conflict to you as the ombuds, but then you also report trends up to the president's office to say, hey, we've seen these kind of things going on. These are some of the issues. How can we address them from a policy standpoint? So that's kind of a new experience for me, but it's fantastic.
Amazing. Ladies, welcome. Robin, kudos to you for bringing such an amazing panel here. So let's kick this off, ladies. There's so much synergy in this room, first of all, between what you all do. And I love that Robin set the stage for talking about this human side of business and this tipping point that we may be at. How does collaboration come into play in moving that forward? And please all feel free to just really engage in the conversation.
I'm going to jump in there because this is this exactly that question lines up with something I feel very passionate about. And let me just do a little bit of background. What prompted me to want to have this collaboration conversation is reading an article about Walmart, one of the biggest companies in the world, wanting to teach its managers how to be more compassionate, how to have more compassion. And I'm going, well, first of all, hallelujah, praise the Lord. But it was, to me, it's like, okay, if the biggest organization in the world is now recognizing and putting it in writing in public, we think this soft skill that some people might have only heard of in Sunday school should be taught in the corporation.
Yeah.
That we're getting to a turning point, or getting to the cusp of where this will just become ubiquitous throughout society. So that is the catalyst for this conversation. But in addition to my Penn degree, a year or two later started my certification in a process called appreciative inquiry with Dr. Cooper Ryder, who invented this many decades ago. And it is exactly collaboration, is where you have any given topic, you come at it from a strengths standpoint, but you bring in the voices. Bring the janitor into the conversation. If you're remodeling your building, don't just talk to the architect and the lender. Bring the janitor into the conversation. What about the secretary? What about the customers? What about the people in the middle? And so the more voices you have, and or the more levels you have represented, the better decision that you're going to have. So to me,
Absolutely.
collaboration, you will not have good decision making without collaboration. And then obviously all of these other soft skills, go into that.
Absolutely. And going back to your comment about Walmart and having the managers have more compassion, I think if these last 3 or 4 years have taught us nothing else, it's taught us that we need to take care of our people. Or, I mean, what you teach, Robin, about how to get, how to have employees that want to stay, right? Instead of leave. If we don't treat our people properly, then we have a revolving door, right?
I want to jump in too and add.
Please,
I think yes, I think when the pandemic started, I think organizations kind of shifted their focus a lot to well-being, to the human side, and I think that was one of the silver linings of the pandemic. And I think it's great. And I think the Gen Z generation that is in the workforce now and entering more and more really wants that, and they're very vocal about it. And so there's a lot of positive changes happening. And I think there's a lot of complexity too, because, just stating or training your managers on compassion is wonderful. And it's also not enough, because you can have a really compassionate manager in a toxic system, right? And so that's one of the backlashes that I hear a lot, like in the trainings, that I go in and do, or in the organizations that I interview. For my qualitative studies, it's like, okay, it's great to train us on resilience, train us on these soft skills, but also make me not need those skills anymore. Like, how about you change the structure, change the systems, have a systems view? And I think it's a both and approach. The individual skills are really important. And we also have to do better organizational design to address this incredible need for connection and collaboration that we have. For sure.
Tomorrow, that makes, I'm sorry, Eileen. That makes me think like, one of the huge, the big tenet of improvisation is this idea of yes and this idea, that you say, like, yes, I hear you. I appreciate your contribution. I'm accepting it. Yes. And the and is like, here's my opportunity to add value. And yes, and here's my contribution. Here's my building on that. But we teach this idea and this this only, I won't say it only works, but it works if everybody is participating in this way. There's a real issue if you are a yes-ander and the people around you aren't supporting you, right? Like you can come in and be super collaborative and super supportive and like looking for how to, full of appreciative inquiry. And if you're not getting that back, if you're in a system that actually pretends to support that but doesn't ultimately, then you're actually left really vulnerable. Uh, if you're not getting supported right back, that becomes super toxic.
And I think going along those lines, changing the culture and changing the foundation of some of these organizations is really, really important. And there is fear about doing this, that they're going to become less effective or less productive. So we really have to make clear to people that that's not the case at all. In fact, people become more productive, more engaged, more focused, all those things. And so when we look at changing the environments, because it's true, this is true with burnout. You could do all the right things, meditate, go to therapy, all this stuff. But if your environment is not okay, it's really hard. So how do we change the environments is looking at in our group, we look at group norms. What's the values that are really there? Are those values, really in play? What are the barriers to being collaborative, caring, and compassionate that exist in an organization? And how do we remove those barriers? And a lot of this has to do with power. Who has power in the room, so to speak? And why are we so afraid to give up that power and having to address those feelings? So I agree with what both of you are saying. It's an and where the individual needs this, but training's not enough. In fact, I would say training is the last thing you do. What you really want to do first is really get an idea of what the culture is and how to move it to the values that people really aspire to.
Yeah, I appreciate all of your comments. I was thinking, so I am a mediator, and the key to collaboration in mediation is confidentiality. And it's an interesting mix in our society right now where everything's very public. So say, Eileen, if I'm thinking about your situation, say USC, it's a very public matter. And people's way of trying to collaborate or at least like protest is very public, and people tend to take sides. So it's interesting where you have a mix of, I believe, some confidentiality with the type of collaboration you do. And then you're not collaborating about every single thing. You're actually taking the most important relationships and the most important topics, and you're putting your energy into those. But there's some conflict triaging that goes on, right? Like if I think about everybody who walks through my door, because we take walk-ins and scheduling, sometimes it's a really mundane thing that can be addressed very simply. And then other times it's more complex, and I actually need more resources than just myself to start to figure it out. Maybe it's like, again, just in my current organizational system, you have athletics, you have registrar, you have compliance, you have the, general counsel. So there's moments to, kind of publish what's going on. But I also think of, Camp David talks back with politics. There's a reason that collaboration happened at Camp David, where sound bites wouldn't kind of prevent people from actually collaborating over issues that are pretty tense. Because if you think anything you say can and will be used against you, you're not going to brainstorm. So the key to our creativity is having that opportunity to think out loud, to talk out loud, maybe even with your adversary in an atmosphere where you're not going to be penalized for trying to think outside the box.
Agreed. I love what you said, Emily, about like you don't have to collaborate about everything. And it reminds me, so the organizations that we studied are, what we call exemplars. And so they're like the beacons of these leadership behaviors that create meaning. And they're doing this really well, like creating this community of people working together and collaborating. And one of the organizations that really stands out to me is HubSpot. They're based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, but they're global. And when we interviewed their chief people officer, at the time, Katie Burke. She told us that they think about it as collaboration, not consensus, which I thought was a really great way to think about it. And she said, people just, they want to be heard. They want to know that their voice matters. They want, even if we don't ultimately go that direction or do what they thought, as long as they have the opportunity to feel heard, to feel empowered, it's okay. And so that's one of their, I don't know if it's a formal value, I don't think it is, but it's one of their expressions that lives and breathes in the organization, this idea of collaboration, not consensus. And they do it really well. They have a really strong culture.
Mhm.
We, in our improv for couples workshops, it's a big theme that comes up, is this idea. A lot of times we play these games, and usually when you start, you get frustrated because the exercise is you and your partner are trying to land on the same word at the same time. Like, you're starting from nothing, you both say random, totally free associated words, and then you're trying to connect them. You're doing the and often couples start getting really frustrated because you count to 3 and then you shout out a word that you think connects them, and it's different. And you're like, come on. And spoiler alert, ultimately the feedback is, hey, we're not actually trying to be the same. We're trying to hear each other and be brave enough to brainstorm in an honest way and share what our weird brain comes up with what your weird brain comes up with, and then think, oh, how interesting, great, what connects them? Okay, let's try again. And if we think the goal is just to be the same, to land on the same word at the same time, that it actually creates conflict, and it creates often bad feelings. And it feels great, like if you do land on the same word at the same time, you're like, yeah, we rule. But that doesn't mean you're soulmates, or that doesn't actually mean that's the best thing you could have come up with. Our job is actually to practice getting comfort, creating an environment where we can openly share our weird brain connections with your weird brain connections, and look for oh, how can I use your thing? How can I be inspired by your idea?
I think it's really important, though, that psychological safety be there for this to happen.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we need to address that in many organizations, there is not a psychological safety, and there's real fear of retaliation or losing jobs or these kind of things. So when we talk about this difference that everyone's, talking about, yes, it's valued, but is it really safe to say it? And I think when we think we all think the same, that way we're safer, and that's not true. So having to change that construct, that getting these varied points of view actually make us better as people, and better to solve the problems of the world. In creating that psychological safety is absolutely key, because otherwise people go right back to, you have to think my way.
Yeah.
So quick question, going off in a little different path here. What I'm hearing is that there is, in many organizations, a top level issue, right? That toxicity can start at the top of the organization, right? So how do we do that? How do we change that top-down structure? How do we change fix those toxic systems that start from the top down, so that we get to that place where you have that psychological safety, where you feel that what you have to add to the conversation, to use your word, Erica, right? How do we get to that place where people feel that safety and feel that relationship with those around them?
I guess this is something I've thought about quite a bit, just in this, again, a new environment. But I do think there's, again, like we're saying, the ability to be heard from the bottom, or whatever level, of an organization you're at. I do think it's interesting. Again, my husband's more in the C-suite type of thing, but 360 evaluations, all those, we know that those can totally backfire also. It's not just if you're at the top and you have power that you like getting negative feedback, right? You actually the research at least says people dismiss it, right? If it's coming from below, you just pay less attention to it. But I think there's something, I guess what I'm keyed into right now is the anonymity of being able to watch trends. Like in an organization, do you have a feedback cycle that actually kind of prevents the retaliation, but allows for trends to become noticeable? So like say like an organizational ombuds, again, not to like hammer this in, I thought what was interesting, because I'm just learning about it, is this idea that you report, you're supposed to be autonomous from the rest of the organization. And then you have these annual reports, or seasonal reports that go up to the highest level and say, I'm not saying who's saying this, but in general, this policy, like I was talking to someone at a university in Colorado, and she was saying, their payment plan, like they had some snafus with their providing, just paychecks, and it was inordinately affecting the lower wages, like people who had, maybe the custodian or like, and they were really struggling, but the other people didn't notice it as much. They had a buffer in their income. So for someone to autonomously say, like independently, do you know that, there's been 50 people who have come to me lately and talked about this issue? Can we get this resolved on a policy level? I think you have to have someone at least who has enough authority to be able to go to that high level, even listen. Because psychologically, when you're at the top, you're thinking about the overview, not necessarily always the individual. That's just my first thought with that.
It's interesting because what came to mind, I like that, being able to be anonymous and find an anonymous way of getting that feedback so that you'll pay attention to it. The thing that popped into my head was actually almost a dichotomy. And, how do we get the people at the top to think about these things? And what came to mind immediately was they need to see how this impacts the bottom line. If they can see how this impacts the bottom line, then they will pay more attention to it. But going along with that, in also almost a dichotomous way, maybe not almost, a dichotomous way, is how do you change someone's heart? How do you have a change of heart to look at other people in the organization as having value, that you value what the janitor has to say, you value what the middle manager has to say, and not just, I'm at the top, I have the power, I can do what I want. So it's highly likely then what you're saying, Emily, that if the people at the top can get this sort of feedback, but not in a way that allows them to retaliate against anybody, then that could create some of the change.
I think you're really onto something there, Robin, where clarifying the goals of the leader. What are they really trying to accomplish? And what do they need to accomplish that? And that's where having an advisor or someone kind of, I often call myself the grandmother of the leaders, if that makes sense, where they come to me and I go like, well, it's not working because of X, Y, and Z. So like they have a wise person to turn to in a way to get that heart part as well. So really looking at what are they trying to accomplish here and what are the barriers, and that's hard. And I think that it is important to assess who is the leader, because we do have sometimes that we have leaders who are, sociopaths or really narcissistic in nature. And then who's the person who, is it a board of trustees that needs to be involved? If there's, looking, because even though I'm a psychologist and I believe people can change, I think there's a limit of how much people can change. So getting the right leadership, and going back to something that Regina said, I actually think toxic environments can also come from the bottom up. I have seen people spoil a whole group, like one person really take the power. So I think one of the things we need to change is this sense of scarcity. We live in a time of abundance, we are so much to be grateful for and so much that's there, yet we act as if it's the last piece of bread on the table and we have to compete with each other. And that's not true. So changing that kind of thinking, even in your leadership and in the people who may below be acting out of fear or because they've been discriminated against over and over again, unfortunately, really changing those kind of foundations, that there is enough for everybody, and that how do you get that compassion present, I think is important, along with what are your goals and how these things interfere with the goals or can really spark success for those goals.
I totally agree with everyone. And Eileen, just to kind of build off on what you said, well, first of all, Regina, I think that's the $1 million question, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think if any of us had like, oh, it's really easy, you just do this, then, we wouldn't have
Be a
this
different
problem.
discussion completely, right?
Exactly. So it's just a really complex issue, but just to build off on what Eileen just said about like, what are your goals, right? And I think a lot of times the leaders at the top, right, which was your question, they're so focused on the business goals and, the productivity, the engagement, the sales numbers, like all the bottom line. And it's sometimes you forget where those come from. And it's from the people that are there, like making those things happen. Right. And I agree with Robin, like just really connecting, making the case for this. There's so much data available. On connection, on feeling included, on feeling a sense of community, all those things. There's like a lot of numbers. It drives productivity. It drives goal achievement. It drives motivation. And so I think making the business case is really important. And I know that there are other researchers and people who really believe this, that say, like we shouldn't have to make the business case. People should just do it because it's the right thing to do. And yes, but I think that's a little naive right now still, right? Because I think we still, and I think, things like going really upstream, like where are people learning these behaviors? Sometimes it is in business school. And a lot of business schools now have classes like teaching this, like, I know Arthur Brooks teaches at Harvard, like I'm going to teach at BC and the Masters of Leadership. And so I think slowly going upstream. And then I will say like the last thing is to really, if you're coaching or if you're working one-on-one or advising, to just ask the leaders, like, what do you want? Like, what kind of environment do you want to work with? Because, I ask, like the first question that I asked in my qualitative study of every single leader, CEO, senior leaders was, describe a time that work felt really meaningful to you. Think about a time when work just felt really meaningful. And they would describe times when they were collaborating and working with people on achieving really hard things and solving really difficult goals. Or it was a time where they got to see the impact of what they did on the consumer, the patient, and so it's always about other people. And I think just reminding them of that can really get to the heart, Robin, to your point.
Yeah. Excellent. Erica, you had or Emily? Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Erica.
No, I just, it's, I think it's the way that I think actually improv is magic. And so like, I've really drunk the Kool-Aid and, I'm like trying to get everybody else to too, but like, I do think so much it's like it's a way to practice these values and practice these skills in a small kind of low stakes way, but I think it forms those new neural pathways around like surrendering your agenda, listening with listening with an eye for like, how can I make your idea work? How can I like appreciative inquiry basically, rather than listening to respond, listening to understand, and but also creating an environment where the goal is a team goal. The goal is not an individual goal, and the goal is never to be a star. The goal is for the whole group to succeed and the whole group to feel safe, and for the whole group to be able to build psychological safety and create an environment where people can be their bravest versions of themselves and take risks and know that everyone has their back and they're not going to look like idiots. And, and I'm hearing you guys talking about this, and it's like, yeah, it's so, it can be so hard to do, but it's why, like, I think this work is so, it's what's so special about improv to me is because it's a way to practice it in your body and practice it in your voice and in your brain and practice it in a way that is safe. And so then you create sort of a language and a community. If you're practicing within the realms of your, organization, then you create a shared language around like, okay, but these are values. We had those values in that workshop. And like, so now, but these are our values. And we practice building those muscles in a different environment where it was safe to do that. So now we actually are a little braver when it comes to practicing speaking up or being vulnerable or, whatever the challenging thing is to do in a new situation.
Erica, yeah, I wanted to comment on that. The idea of the like an environment of safety. I was thinking, I mean, it sounds silly, but even like I've talked with my husband about some of his work where, like, when he had one-on-ones with the owner of the company, there so many things got resolved that would never get resolved in a larger meeting. So the time that's, I guess, from a conflict perspective, and like to collaborate, the time taken to meet with the individual has huge dividends. You may think that you're like being more effective or more productive, or efficient by pooling everybody together. But if you have a group conflict, generally speaking, anytime I mediate, I pull apart the different players. Like I may notice, someone may say, oh, our team is always fighting. But actually what's happening, it's like 2 or 3 individuals, like Eileen was kind of mentioning, like it may be a bad apple or someone's kind of stirring the pot each time. So I can try to address that as a team, but my time may be better spent focusing on that, like that pair or those 3 people that are really struggling. And then if we kind of resolve that issue and bring them back into the group, then the collaboration may be, it may go better.
Yeah. What's coming to mind from what each of you has said recently about goals and about, individual working is a thought that I've been thinking for some time now. And it's the notion of when does our goal get in the way of our goal? And just a very tiny snippet from history is Susan B. Anthony was fighting for the women to get the right to vote, and they agreed, okay, we will put our work aside to help emancipation, and so that the Black people can be emancipated. And by the way, today is Juneteenth, and yes, so my comment is highly appropriate for Juneteenth. So we will put aside our women's suffrage work to help the Blacks be emancipated. Well, then they came, the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments, where they slipped into the amendment that, and I should know they slipped in the amendment, there's only males who could vote, not women who could vote. It's only the males. And Susan B. Anthony and the other leaders were so outraged, but she and another person were so beyond, as Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who is like one of my heroes. They were so outraged that they started just saying, we will not support these amendments. They began bad-mouthing all of these Black people who've been helping them in the suffrage, and they caused a wedge in the suffrage movement that took like 25 years to heal. And so their goal of getting suffrage and being so adamant in it caused them to behave in ways that set back their movement by decades. And so that leads to, when, it's like management, we want this or we want that, is how is your wanting that and forcing the issue actually defeating the overarching goal of having a successful organization? And I hope I haven't gotten too off track.
Yeah.
No, that's beautiful.
Robin, something you said really sparked up for me where, I know it's funny, but I would have asked Susan B. Anthony and the others, is that really the why? Is the suffrage the why, or is there a deeper why? Meaning we want all people to have rights, that's there, and to join on the right why. Why are you doing this? Like, why are you wanting the vote? In terms of that. So sometimes I think we have to take groups and get them to the deeper meaning of what's there, because then it crosses across those divides and exclusions, and really helps a group progress forward.
Very good. Emily?
Oh, just well said with that. I like, again, just thinking as a mediator, that one of the key things, any conflict, again, like this is conflict being maybe the contrast to the collaboration. People generally come in with a solution, a proposed way to meet a need. And the main job of a mediator to be able to collaborate is to translate a proposed solution into a fundamental need, which is what we're talking about, the why. Like, what's the actual thing you're needing? And you may have thought for a long time about all these possibilities about how the other person is supposed to change so that you can get your why met. But it's interesting to collaborate. You actually have to reframe what people say into, okay, it sounds like you're really frustrated with the timelines and you're wanting more, more personal time or whatever that is. And then their possibilities open up for collaboration once you've come to a universal human need. But if you stay on the proposed solutions, it's just a barter negotiation. Who's gonna submit? Who can be coerced? And that's not where we're most creative. We want to collaborate because we know there's innovative ways to look at, issues, and we want something better than what we have right now. People will, like, the conflict is basically like somebody's not willing to accept the status quo. So if the status quo is not good enough, we've got to identify what the needs are underlying, like Eileen was talking about, to really make any progress. And I think even in our society, we're kind of stuck with a lot of solutions. We just need to lower taxes or whatever, get it whatever the needs are, as opposed to typical ways to respond to meeting needs.
Yeah. One of the things you said earlier, Emily, reminded me of, I had a staffing firm for a number of years, and one of the tools that we used to enhance collaboration and communication was a personality profile that is over 90% predictive of success on the job. And we had two young ladies who had a little tussle, and was on my way to the office, and someone calls and said, "We just had a cat fight." I said, "Oh, no, you didn't. We don't do that in this company." But I brought both of those ladies into the room. I actually told them to bring a champion with them. Bring somebody with you on staff that knows you, that has your back, that can speak for you when you can't speak for yourself. And so we brought the four people in, and we put their personality profiles up on the whiteboard. And it was so clear where the conflict was coming from. It was absolutely totally apparent that, where the difference in their personality characteristics were causing that conflict. And so we were able to help them understand one another and understand why this person was approaching things differently and why that seemed to set the other person off, that kind of a thing. And so for me, one of the huge takeaways from that is that with understanding comes compassion. And when we can have compassion for that other person, that enhances our ability to collaborate with them, to communicate with them at all levels, and to work together better. And so it was a really powerful experience for us. I have a picture of those two ladies standing by the counter hugging each other afterwards.
And you could have said, "Hey, you guys go," even like a parent often will say, "Hey, you guys go work it out in the other."
Go work it out. Yeah.
And if you do that, even with employees, the more powerful person is maybe just going to decide what happens.
Exactly.
Collaboration doesn't, it takes the most skill, of any of the conflict like resolution approaches.
Yes.
So you have to make sure there's a base level of skill and trust
Yes.
before you throw people into a situation where they're supposed to collaborate.
Right. Right.
You know,
And
this
so,
leads me to, I love what Emily has talked about power a couple of times. And Eileen talked about the notion that anyone can be a leader. It's not, leadership isn't, being a leader isn't just tied to a title. And so I think that is really true, that how can we help the people who do have the real power wield it judiciously, wield it ethically, and
yes.
how do we help the people who don't have the power or who don't perceive themselves to have the power to act in more powerful and more leadership ways, regardless of their position. I think a lot can be done. A lot can be done.
Ladies, that may have to be a topic for another show because we're out of time.
Oh, wow.
This has been great. I appreciate so much everybody's contribution, but we're going to move into our wrap-up round. And Robin, I'm going to ask you to run that round. If you would have each person please share their final thoughts on collaboration and their contact information. And while you do that, I'll put their contact information into the public comments for them.
Okay. So my contact information is robinlearningsystems.com. There you will find keynotes, programs for organizations, and workshops for women. So robinlearningsystems.com. If you go to the blog, then you will find some free downloads. And I'm actually doing a workshop this Friday, June 21st, 1 o'clock p.m. Pacific time, 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern, on Transform Your Inner Critic. And so if you go to workshops, you'll see some signups there, and you can have some discount codes and stuff. So put in the discount code HOPE for a 50% discount. I'll just tell you right now. And so that's me. And my final word is I feel very passionate about the notion that we adults spend most of our lives at work. And is it too much to have workplaces that are humane, ethical, and resilient? I don't think so. I think we can create workplaces where people want to stay instead of wanting to leave. And that's my really huge passion. So let's go around the squares again. Tamara, Erica, Eileen, and then Emily.
Thank you. I so agree with you, Robin. And it's not even enough to have workplaces that don't suck. Like, we need workplaces that are, hubs of human thriving. And one of the ways to get there, to just tie it back, put a bow around this whole conversation about collaboration, is by feeling connected and included rather than isolated and ignored or rejected, right? And to paraphrase the book Belonging, feeling connected and included, feeling that we belong is a condition for success. It's not a byproduct of success, but it's a condition. And I too am very passionate about that and believe that very strongly. And that's the work I do every day. And it makes me very excited. And so the best way to reach me is on LinkedIn. I'm very active on there, and also on my website. I have a lot of information there.
Awesome.
Okay. I don't have a website. I should. I shared my email with Regina, positiveimprov@gmail.com. But so here's the thing that I've been thinking a lot about in this conversation. It's this idea that, well, first of all, if you say no, you stay safe, and so much of our lives are in response to trying to keep ourselves safe and keep others safe, and it's a super useful skill to be able to say no. But if you say yes, you go on an adventure, and if you say yes to others, then you open up possibility. And if you, the way to be the most brave version of yourself is to put your attention on others. If you're feeling self-conscious and you're worried about protecting yourself or making sure you're presenting yourself in a certain way, you're not actually open to others and open to collaborating. And the way to allow yourself to let go of that self-consciousness is to put your attention on others and just see who needs me, who needs me, who needs me. And that's what we do in improv workshops. And that's what I try to do in everyday life.
I want to agree with everybody. We want to move people from just surviving to thriving. And what does that take? Is that connection, that safety that Emily, you're talking, like this sense of fairness, equity. I think, it is Juneteenth, like looking at this and how do we strive to help people to really feel like they belong in their communities, work communities, neighborhoods, etc., even in our country. So my lasting thought is to have a better world, we really need to care about each other and to really not demonize each other, work on really looking at the good in us and how we can get that connection of humanity. The best way to reach me is probably through my email at this time. And I think you have that, Regina, that you could put in the chat.
Yeah, I can grab that.
Great. Thank you.
Fantastic. As a developmental psychologist, I definitely believe any conflict situation you can avoid, accommodate, compromise, compete, and collaborate, and that all are useful in different situations, but collaborating takes the most skill, and it actually demands that you know who you are and what you want. To be able to listen well enough to what somebody else wants, you have to have some kind of confidence or security in yourself. So it behooves us, I think, to have that skill to be able to use and to collaborate when it makes sense in the most important issues, in the most important relationships. And it's worth taking the time to not be in conflict within yourself as well. Just having studied mindfulness, I can see a soul in conflict is going to bring conflict wherever they go. So it helps for us to kind of what our presence, what we bring to the table should be cohesive and integrated. So it's we should take that time. And so a book I've written is Conflict Fluent. So there's a website, just conflictfluent.com. And then for teaching children, raisingmediators.com. The idea, how much easier would it be if we taught collaboration to really small children rather than expecting, adults to suddenly know how to do it. So.
Very good. Ladies, thank you so much for being here. What a great show. I am sure our listeners found it enriching as well. And look forward to hearing some of their comments on it, to getting some feedback on it. With that, we'll wrap it up for today. Thank you for joining us here on Collaboration Conversations, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Thank you.